Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and this video is about internal family systems and money. This was a topic that was requested in my monthly IFS practitioner consultation group. And in those groups, usually when someone asks me to talk about a topic, I'll give my thoughts and opinions and experiences, and then there's a discussion, and people are absolutely welcome to have a different perspective than I do, to have different experiences, right? All of us come by our opinions and biases very honestly, based on the experiences that we have had. So I may present my experiences very confidently because it is my experience. You can't argue with another person's experience, but it's okay if you have had a different experience or even an opposite experience, right? And your system needs something opposite than mine, or you have just a different perspective. So I am going to share my screen, and here we are. So IFS and money. Money can be, a tricky subject. It can have all kinds of burdens and baggage and trauma and cultural legacy burdens attached to it, right? So the first thing that I would suggest, this is something that we do a lot in the weekly IFS support group or community, is what I call a roundtable parts discussion. And so it's wonderful. You can do it on a paper where you just draw a circle and you write the topic in the middle of the circle. I say you're putting it on the table. You can also do this if you are just, in a meditative space. Imagine that the topic of money is on the table or in the center of the circle, and you invite all the parts who have any opinion. They can have very opposing opinions. You can have many parts with different perspectives, but you're inviting all of them that have anything to say about this topic on the table. So even if you want to pause this video and just do this for a couple minutes, just watch. I often say to observe your pets around the table, right? So observe any physical sensations that you notice that come up when you're explicitly focusing on the topic of money. You might experience anxiety, you might experience relaxation or excitement. I don't know. There might be parts that are experiencing all kinds of things. So pay attention to your physical sensations, your emotional energy toward it. Is there fear? Is there anger? Is there sadness, frustration, shame? Just really pay attention to that. And then really watch your thoughts. Sometimes you can even draw a stick figure with a little thought bubble, and just whatever comes into your mind. There's no censoring. There's nothing right or wrong. You're just observing it, right? There's no judgment. It's just, interesting. Okay. This part is thinking, sometimes the thoughts that will come into your mind are like these mantras that you've heard before, like the love of money is the root of all evil, right? It might be something that your father or grandfather or mother, has said to you, or maybe in your religion. You might have flashes of memory, maybe significant experiences where you didn't have your needs met, you were in poverty or something, you didn't have money. Or you might have an experience run through your mind, if you're just open to it, where you had some kind of windfall, right? And you got money that you felt like you didn't deserve, um, or a time when you just felt in flow and money was coming in and you weren't really trying, or I don't know. There's so many different possibilities. But really, again, this is just a sitting back and observing everything that's alive in you around this topic. That's the first thing that I highly recommend. You'll find probably a lot of trailheads around this. Um, and so a really common thing to explore around money is cultural burdens, right? And again, these are kind of sayings that like live simply so that others can simply live, right? Kind of these rules to live by, maybe. Um, like it's better to live simply, or you can have in your cultural context, you might have had something else like strive and work hard, and you know, your success is based on how much you earn and how many things you have, and your worth is based on that, right? There might be those kinds of messages. So it can be completely opposite of someone else's. Like I said, money is the root of all evil, which I think the direct quote is the love of money is the root of all evil, but a lot of people will just say money. Um, or yeah, more money equals more happiness, right? I think that's a really pervasive thing, especially in our consumerist culture, that all of these ads that we see all the time, you will be happier if you have this yacht, or if you have this face cream or whatever it is, right? You need to spend money to be happy, to get these things, right? It's really the air we breathe. We hear it so much, we may not even be aware of it. So just getting curious about that. You can even do this during the day or as you're watching ads or you're listening to other people. Again, there's no judgment in it. It's just kind of like that's interesting. This is something that I'm hearing a lot. I'm noticing the attitudes, the beliefs around money, from my family, from my friends, from the media, right? Um, so cultural burdens are more general, right? The messages that we're getting from TV shows, songs, books, media in general. Legacy burdens are really specific to your family, right? Your specific parents, grandparents' view on money. So that's another thing to, again, it's just an exploration without judgment. Because if and when the parts come in, and they might, that judge it, it's hard to receive it objectively and get curious about it and why, because everything that is a legacy burden or a cultural burden at its precipitation, at its start, was there for a reason. And then it just might continue and not be applicable anymore. And so we can question it, but we don't need to judge it. We don't need to say, oh, this is terrible, because then that actually closes us off to exploring it. So you might want to work with the parts that feel judgmental and validate them. I get it. This part seems extreme in the culture. You're right about that, but can I get curious about it and why it might have started? So again, just exploring. And you might, if you can, again, this is a receptive exercise. So it's not necessarily efforting. It's not trying to think of all these moments. What did my grandparents say about money? If you can, sometimes you can do a visualization where you're in a completely white room, because it kind of helps you empty your mind. Just imagining, white floor, white walls, white ceiling, and you're just standing or sitting, resting in that space. And the topic is money throughout your family, throughout the ages. And you just allow, it could be objects, memories, images, words, whatever comes, to just kind of pass in front of you, almost like it's like cars on the freeway, just like going by. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. And you can just let it come to you, and your kind of subconscious parts might be able to show you, oh yeah, I remember when my grandfather told me that he basically, when he was young, had chickens and goats, and milked the goat for milk, and had eggs and fruit trees and vegetables, and kind of lived off the land, and that they had very little money but a lot of love, or something. I don't know. There might be something that comes to you, and you might be an image of a goats and chickens or something like that. So just, if you can, just let it come to you, and it'll be very insightful. If you have a question about how to do that, you can write that in the comments. And then you can explore your personal burdens. So cultural burdens are kind of the air you breathe, what you're hearing everywhere around you. legacy burdens are in your family line, kind of passed down to you through messaging and behaviors. And personal burdens are your personal experiences with money. So you might have had a really scary experience where you earned money and someone stole it from you. Or you feel, upset because you were maybe like, I'm thinking of my own experiences. You were a freelance person and didn't realize that you had to give a quarter of your income to the government, and then you didn't have enough to live on. And so you have these angry feelings around taxes, around the government, or maybe as a kid, you watched your parents withhold money from each other, right? But it's a direct experience where you observed it, or you had the experience, not someone else had the experience. Okay. Okay, I heard someone describe this and I really like it. If you don't, that's okay. But it was around money and happiness. And they drew this graph that was an upside down N, which I guess would be or an upside down U, which would be an end, right? It's like this, right? Like a rainbow. And on the x-axis was the amount of money that you make. So as you go this way, you're making more money. And the y-axis is the amount of happiness. So as you go up, your happiness goes up. So if you imagine the x and y axis like this, okay, so this is money, this is happiness. It was initially as your income goes up, as you're going this way on the x-axis, your happiness also goes up, right? So there's truth to that if you don't have enough to take care of your basic needs, to have shelter and water and food and clothing, security, right? Your happiness will go down if you have less, right? If you're in poverty. So it goes up like this. And then there's a certain point at which it plateaus. And then the further you go on the x-axis, the more money you get, the less and less and less and less happy you are. And that's because really the more things you have, the more stress, the more you have to manage, the more you fear it being taken away. There's a lot more responsibilities with it, right? So I really like that because it's a both and. When people say, having money makes you happy, yes, it does affect your happiness when you're in this place where you don't have your basic needs met. But once you get to that point where your basic needs are met and you have a sense of security, getting more and more does not, in fact, make you happier and happier. So that has been my experience. If you have a different experience, you're welcome to share that. And so this is just a question. This is something that when I did the training with Martha Beck, she talked a little bit about money as being this energy that just flows in and out of our lives, like a river, kind of just flowing through. And it really does that. It's interesting, right? They talk about it as a currency, but I think of like a current, that it's just flowing in and out. And the money itself is more of this symbol of value, of security, of getting your needs met. So for example, in nonviolent communication, when Marshall Rosenberg talks about our core universal human needs, money is not one of them. Money is a strategy to get our needs met, right? So it represents our other basic needs being able to get met, like sustenance, right? Food, water, air. Luckily, air is free and we can hopefully get water. But so it's a means to get those needs met, security, rest, right? Belonging, purpose. So money might be a strategy to get those needs met, but it's not the actual need, right? So it's a means to an end. So if we think of money as kind of this tool, this measure of something valuable, right? So if I'm a coach and I'm coaching someone, I am exchanging value, right? I'm giving you something valuable and you're giving me money, which itself is not value, but it's a placeholder for value so that I can then later get something of value, right? But if we think of the money as like having an innate good or bad to it, I think it's not helpful. It's just like I often say, you know, a hammer is not innately constructive or destructive. It's what you do with the hammer, right? You can build a house or you can, um, you know, hurt someone with with a hammer. So money is the same thing. It's this neutral entity that we ascribe value to and we can use. We can actually, so instead of us feeling like a victim to the money, we can say, oh, I have agency and I can use money to my advantage, right? I can affect how far it goes in my life and make sure that my income is greater than my expenses, or, you know, just the agency that we can feel around money. So in IFS, we talk about self-leadership, which is really that this core self that is confident and courageous and creative and calm and curious, right? This core self is in the driver's seat. It has a sense of security. It listens to all the parts. So when we had that parts meeting at the beginning, it takes into account the perspective and the needs of all those parts. It's kind of like the head of the family. And it can say, okay, I get your concern, I get your need. Let's come up with a creative solution that meets all of those needs. So when a person is self-led in their system, it may lead them toward making more money. It may lead them toward making less money. It may lead them toward a more extravagant life in some ways or a simpler life. It's just going to depend on your individual system and what your system wants, needs, and desires, and what's best for you. So we can't look at someone else and judge them and say, oh, they're an idiot for, you know, retiring, or they're evil because they have so much money or something like that. So what really matters more than the amount of money we have, I think, is one, that our basic needs are met and that we have freedom and a sense of worth and purpose. And so it's like money to me is just a side, it's not the main thing, right? It can be used to achieve some of these things as a tool, like I said. Or I'm thinking of Marshall Rosenberg, who said, you know, that he didn't agree with his government at the time and didn't want to pay taxes. So he was really, I think, self-led and clever in his decision to say, I'm going to make the bare minimum so that I'm not required to pay taxes, and anything that I make above that, I'm going to give away to charity so that my money is not going to the government. And that was his choice because that was his value, right? That was his priority. And others might feel like, you know, a totally different, but you can have that agency to make choices for yourself that is in alignment with your own values. Ooh, next time is IFS and suicidality. Okay, so again, those are just some of my thoughts and some of my recommendations around getting to know your parts around money. I do think it's a really valuable exercise to do because a lot of us do have parts that get really activated around money. They talk about, you know, I think it's the two biggest things that couples argue about, right? Is like in-laws and money, something like that. So money can be a really activating topic. So getting curious, allowing that activation to help you go inside and get curious. I guarantee that those parts make sense. It's based on messaging you've gotten from culture, from family, personal experiences you've had. And with the personal experiences, you may need yourself to go back and be with that younger self in those moments and reparent, redo situations. You may need to go in and help them unburden, release the cultural burdens, the religious burdens, the legacy burdens, invite ancestors in to release them and be free of them so that you can have clarity and creativity around money and around what it looks like to make money. Last thing I'll say about this is actually, I remember my system, my parts were really, they had this very narrow, constricted view of the types of things that would make money and what I had to do to make money. So an example is that I did the whole coaching program, and I was doing one-on-one work, and I was good at it, and people wanted to work one-on-one with me. But for whatever reason, my system did not want to do that. My body started collapsing. It didn't want to do one-on-one work, but there were other parts that were like, you have to do one-on-one work because that's how you make your money, right? At the time, I didn't make anything at all on YouTube. I still make this much, but so I didn't make anything on YouTube. There was no other thing I was making money on, right? Content on social media. It was just the one-on-one work. So it was like, I have to do this in order to make money. But when I stepped back and I brought all the parts into the meeting and I had them talk, and then there was some self-leadership there, taking in all their perspectives and allowing them to then be creative, kind of like, like a meeting where there's no bad idea. You can throw everything out and brainstorm together, right? That's how you come up with good ideas, when you're allowed to come up with ridiculous ideas. And so all my parts started throwing out ideas. And that's when one of my parts said, well, what if you have a group and the group can expand and grow? So you're doing the same amount of work, but your income can grow from it. And I had never thought of that option before. So I think that when there's self-leadership and all the parts are allowed to come to the table, there's access to creativity. There's so many different ways to make a living and not compromise your limited capacities, to follow your fascination, but it requires a softening of some of those rigid parts and allowing of the flexibility and the creativity and the experimentation and to see what works and what doesn't work. So people know I'm constantly assessing, is this working? Is it not working? Because I do believe that we can follow our passion, follow our fascination, and get our basic needs met and make a living. I actually think it's the whatever excites us, whatever we value and we love to do, is what how we were meant to serve the world, right? I can listen to a person talk about any topic if they are passionate about it, if they love it, right? I'll watch their YouTube videos or whatever. And we do live in this day and age with technology where there are just so many amazing opportunities that people never had in the past. And then there's other ways to get our basic needs met in a very direct way, right? By planting a garden, living in a place with fresh water and fresh air, where the climate is such that we don't need a lot of shelter or a lot of heat and air conditioning, or, there's so many different ways that we can, if we loosen the grip on a specific strategy, that we can get our needs met. Okay, I've said more than I intended to. So if you have any comments or any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below.